Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Ryden. I can't tell you how many times my late mother would complain about the state of the world and the culture and the politicians, and she would always end up with, well, I can't do anything about it. And that's the feeling of many people who look at the state of the world and feel powerless. Our guest today, Skip Flanagan, says you don't have to feel that way. In his book, Your Only Choice is to Be Rich, he's got some help for the helpless. Welcome, Skip, coming to us from Houston today, right?
Thanks, Mr. Paul. How you doing?
Good, good, good. Well, that's an intriguing idea. If being rich is our only choice, I'm sure you'd have a lot of people saying, hey, sign me up. So, what exactly do you mean by being rich is the only choice?
Well, basically, when I wrote the book, I was actually on probation for like 10 years. And it seemed hopeless because, I couldn't vote. I couldn't get an apartment. And realistically, I couldn't get a government job, stuff like that. So at that time, it seemed like it was hopeless. It's just like it's parallels to the situation with the kids right now, where a lot of them, when they get out of high school and their dreams don't come true, nowadays it's like they don't try again.
Mhm.
It's like now it's straight to the streets. It's like, okay, I want to be a doctor. I can't be a doctor. So now, I can always go be a gangster and rob people and stuff like that. So when I wrote the book, I was actually on probation for 10 years for selling drugs, which I was just doing it out of frustration. I played basketball at Oregon Tech and I was upset because, they didn't pan out like I thought it would. So, got caught up, but probation actually helped me.
Mhm.
It made me think more, because I didn't want to go to prison. I didn't want to, I didn't want to graduate on
Understandable.
that side, on that side. So, uh, I knew that I still had dreams of being a film director, being a musician and stuff like that. So I knew I couldn't get it done with a job. So I knew I could be an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I got redirected to my dreams. Even through adversity, I got redirected to my dreams, and that dream was to be an entrepreneur. And I knew that, becoming an entrepreneur, it was everything was on me, and that's basically how I live my life right now. I only eat the fish that I catch. So and I don't look to other people to finance those dreams. Entrepreneurship just created a whole new thinking for me. And if I failed, it was on me. It was nobody to blame. If I wasn't as creative as I need to be, I couldn't reach certain altitudes. So that was the thinking behind that. You are responsible for your success and your journey. And depending on how creative you are, you can become rich. Entrepreneurs usually become rich because there's no salary cap. So that
Right.
was the thinking behind it.
Well, the cover of your book would lead people to think maybe you're only talking about material wealth and riches that way, but there's
Most
more to it
definitely.
than that, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and the book talks about how life is dual. It's spiritual and material. But
Right.
a lot of times you have to use those monetary things as a way to reach those people that think like that. You know what I'm saying? People don't respect people that good people. Even today in today's time. You go out here, you talk about a whole bunch of good stuff. Nobody listens. Everything is clickbait driven, drama
Mhm.
driven, so, you know, uh that's the goal. And that was the foundation of the American dream anyway, to be monetarily rich. But, I just try and balance it. I do make a lot of money, you know what I'm saying? So that's what intrigues a lot of people as well. I bought a Mercedes, but I don't drive it as much, you know what I'm saying? But I know that's what people like. So I get those things, but at the same time, when they start researching me, they'll find out that it's a spiritual foundation to everything that I do.
Yeah, there is a spiritual component to your book. Tell us a little bit about that. How'd that come about?
Well, basically, I grew up in Louisiana. My grandmother was real spiritual. She used to have the pictures of Jesus on the wall. She used to wake up playing spiritual music. I want to be at the meeting around the cross. So, I was always religious. Even in school, when we moved to Houston, the teacher used to always ask. That's when, they had 10 Commandments in school, prayer in
Mhm.
school, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
The
right.
teacher used to ask me what church I used to go to. And I didn't go to church, but I used to tell her I go to the Catholic church. And she was Catholic. She was like, I don't go to Catholic church too. But I was like lying. So I was like, man, but I always I always wanted to attach myself to a church back then, not now. People don't want to do that now. But when I grew up in an era where like I tell people, well, you can go pump the gas and then pay. That was a whole country in a Christian mindset, and they drilled religion into us back then, which was a good thing. It wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing because it created a situation where people thought about what they did. They paid attention to the Ten Commandments. So that's the root of who I am. So everything that I do, that's why, if I tell a lot of people, if I didn't have that spiritual foundation, I'd be a lot worse a guy. I'd
Yeah.
be selling drugs, poisoning some kids, but everything I do has a spiritual foundation. Even my book, my kids' book, The Spiritual Wizard, it's a creative book that also has a prayer that I wrote in there. So, everything is spiritual that I do. That's Skip Lane. When they look at me, it's gonna be love. Everything I do is love and God and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, there is something to be said for being rich in good deeds, too, as it says in the Bible.
Right. Right.
The first chapter of your book sounds like a campaign speech. And in fact, it ends with Skip Flanagan for president, 2016. Well, I think that ship has sailed right now. But do you have political ambitions in the future?
As I look at, life, as I look at how things have changed, I was asked a question one time, when you dream the life, what would you think about? When you dream a dream, like if I dream right now, I don't dream thinking about future. I dream thinking about what's going on right now. So when I was dreaming all the dreams I dreamed, and now that they're coming true right now, I didn't know that a lot of the things that are happening right now will be happening. I didn't know that people wouldn't like God. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know that people would be as hateful as they are right now. I didn't know a lot of these things. So it's a lot of things that, like politics that I just wouldn't do just knowing what I know now. You know what I'm saying? I think I could go at a different way, through filmmaking and through motivational speaking and stuff like that. But for me to become a politician would be counter to everything that I represent because I don't see how they represent to Americans. You know what I'm saying? That's why I kind of tune out to a lot of TV because I like meeting people face to face. In my book, I talk about groups and how groups are bad things because if one person does something bad in that group, then everybody in that groups get charged for that one thing in that group. So my means of living this life and finding peace and being happiness is by me not paying attention to the stereotypes,
Mhm.
by me just meeting people and judging people on their accomplishments and stuff like that, and just reaching people one at a time, and it's working. So I enjoy what I'm doing right now. So that wouldn't be something that I would do. But like I said, back in the day, that was the dream, to be president, that was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
But it's not now.
You say in your book, you say you have a lot of worries. What are some of the worries that keep you up at night now?
you know, uh, a lot of the things like, the direction of the company, the direction of the kids just not looking at people as good people, the people not being spiritual. When you have to ask yourself, is it okay to put the Ten Commandments at state buildings, federal buildings? When you have to ask yourself, is it okay to put prayer in school? Stuff like that. When you see the direction that the pastors are going, when you see where the president says he knows he's going to hell and he's leading the country, you know what I'm saying? Stuff
Mhm.
like that. You have to believe what you see with your own eyes, and when you see all these countries that are bombing this country, I'm more of a proactive guy. So I think about God and, I think about karma. God is going to do something. And I fear that maybe one day I might just get off track and I might become them. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm constantly trying to make sure that I be the good guy and the guy that God wants me to be because I never want to put myself in a situation that at any time I'll be cast to hell.
Yeah. You say in your book, too, that every step in America is a difficult one. What do you mean by that?
It is. It is. It's trying to be good. I even have a chapter there called Coasting the Mischief. When you get into uh, a lot of situations, when you get broke sometimes, when you go through crisis in your marriage and life and family, sometimes, because every second of your life is you have to ask somebody for instructions. You're leaning somewhere and the devil might have a better solution than God sometimes. So,
At least it
it,
seems like it. Yeah.
yeah, it's scary when you just think that, I told a friend the other day, when you look at a serial killer, you look at, the profile of a serial killer, look in the mirror, that could be you. You
Mm.
know, when you get off track and when you don't listen to God and you listen to someone else. So it's a constant fight to be in one accord with God. You know, you gotta always say, no, I'll accept this. You know, you're going through hard times all the time. So you just can't break. You know, just don't break.
Tell us a little bit about your background. You've mentioned getting involved in filmmaking and that kind of thing. You've been a teacher,
Right.
you've been a coach, you're a
Right.
musician, an author. You even have a landscaping company in Houston, which has
Oh,
been an
yes, sir.
award-winning landscape
Yeah.
company, I might add.
Mhm.
Why such a diverse work history? Are you like me with a short attention span, or what?
No, you know, it's just like when we grow up, you know, we grew up under where you had all those champions. We had Muhammad Ali, Kennedy. You had people that were intentionally trying to be great, you know, and you wanted to be interviewed by Barbara Walters. So that was a pinnacle, you know. But in my book, I talk about how you have to have a job to get the job, and the
Mm-hmm.
job of finance the dream, but God will reward you with destiny. So it's just like everything that I decide I want to do. And I think that's the beauty of my life. No matter what it is I see that I want to do, I just go and do it. You know what I'm saying? So it just leads me to different things. You know what I'm saying? When I was playing basketball, got as close as I could to going pro. And when it stopped, I went to something else. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So, you know, once you jump into entrepreneurship, you know, you find yourself doing a whole bunch of stuff. But, you know, it's just like I'm not a finished product. You know, everything is leading up to me being that film director. So I'm still on that path. I'm not finished, even though I'm getting awards and stuff for what I'm doing right now, because I
Mm-hmm.
just put 100% effort into everything that I'm doing. That's just my format. You know, whatever I do is doing a documentary, making music, every song, you know, it's just gonna be my perfect work.
Mm-hmm.
So
What inspired you to write the book? I mean, you to put all that together. What drove you to do that?
well, I had a friend that stayed behind me, you know, and he was always telling me, this kid wrote a book, Skip, you know, you ought to write a book. I say, well, okay, I'll write a book. But I used to read a lot when I was in college, and I read a book by Langston Hughes and also Martin Luther King, Where Do We Go From Here? And it's like when I read those books, it was like they could put you right in that room with them.
Hmm.
You know, when I read a book by Langston Hughes, it was like I could see him drinking the coffee and you know talking about the times that were going on. And then I read Martin Luther King book, and he was man, he was so deep. It was ridiculous. And you know, even when I look back at some of the stuff that I read about Martin Luther King, he's probably one of the most prophetic guys I've ever read about. You know, and so I was always fascinated with people that could take a time or a moment in time and put it in book form. So I wanted to do that, and that's what I do with my writing. You know, I actually have some more books, but you know, just getting these off the ground. You know, I just love these books right here that I'm promoting right now. But I have some even better books. But writing is my thing. You know, so I love writing. I love, you know, like a lot of people used to say when I used to write, it was like you know, you some stuff you miss, like when they say speeches, they could come back and want to hear the same thing that I said at the last speech. So
Mhm.
I used to just write it down and write it in books and make sure it is in a whole bunch of details so they can get it. So I just like to record the times that are going on. That's why when you were saying 2016, that's when I wrote the book. Before that, you know, it was actually like 2000 something when I wrote the book, but it's even prophetic even now than it
Mhm.
was then, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what I like to do. I like to record history in book form.
Yeah, that's the
So,
interesting thing about reading books too, is that you have the author. It's almost like you said, like he's sitting in the room with you with a cup of coffee, and you get to share their wisdom and knowledge. It's a great thing.
right,
As Stephen King says, if you're going to be a good writer, you got to read a lot too. Read a lot
right,
and write a lot, and you obviously do that.
right,
This is your second book. Tell us
right,
about your first one. It's got a different feel altogether. The Return of the Spiritual Wizard. We come to
right,
Earth, say one kid at a time. What in the world?
right. Right. Spiritual Wizard is a character, you know, and I'm gonna have a series to that, you know what I'm saying? And it's about this little kid that was going through some stuff at school, and he
Mm,
got his iPhone took, and he wasn't supposed to take his phone to school, so he took it there anyway, and he came back crying. He was talking, listening to the music and talking about killing somebody. I'm gonna kill this guy. He took my phone. So this wizard pops up. Man, you're not supposed to kill people, man. Well, he took my, that's why I listened to the music. The music told me I'm supposed to kill him. He said, no, you're not supposed to handle it like that. So he gave him a prayer, to read, and I also told him if he, when he come back, knock on the door 4 times, and he was going to answer and he was going to help me. So he went back to school and talked to the teacher. The teacher helped him get his phone back. He ended up joining the football team, and
Mm.
he was excited. So he came back. He wanted to tell the Wizards everything he did. So he knocked on the floor. He was beating it on it. The Wizards never answered. So he finally did it 4 times. And then the Wizards answered. He said, "Why you didn't answer?" He said, "Because you're not paying attention. You're not following instructions." So basically, it's just teaching them how to follow instructions, and just, how to handle situations versus killing people. Just go ahead and have your teacher or your mom handle a situation. And what I'm going to do is have each book, I'm going to have a different, like a handicapped person added in there to help the wizard, some
Yeah.
angels to help the wizard, stuff like that. They're going to go around and save the community,
So
and
that's going to
stuff
be
like
so that's going to be a continuing series. Then you're going to continue to work on
exactly,
that. Oh, that's
exactly.
great. Great,
Yeah.
great. What do you hope readers get out of the book we're talking about today? Your only choice is to be rich. What do you hope that readers take away from that?
That's a book that if you read it, it'll change your mindset. I wanted to change the mindset, just give them a different mindset about life, more powerful mindset, more spiritual mindset. Like I said, I have chapters in there called Maximum Output, where I talk about how you have to get the most out of your whole life, how you have to operate at 100% of your potential versus 30 to 20%, which a lot of people operate at going the other way. They operate at a high frequency going negative, but when we go in positive, we want to encourage as many people to go at 100 to 90, going the right way. So, your only choice to be rich. I just want them to motivate them to be entrepreneurs, to be whatever they want career wise. Whatever your career is, chase your career, enjoy your life by chasing your career, going back to the careers that we had when we were in school, doctor, lawyer, science writer, instead of gangster,
Yep, yep.
stuff like
Good
that.
choice.
So,
Well, the
yeah.
book is
So,
called Your Only Choice is to Become Rich. It's available on Amazon. I assume it's available other places. Skip, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure
you
talking
was a
with you.
gracious host, man. Pleasure talking to you as well, man. That was one of the better interviews I've had, man.
Thank you very much. You as well.
All right,
Hey,
thank
and
you.
thank you, folks, for spending a few minutes with us on the Global Book Network. I'm Paul Ryden. We'll see you next time.